So tomorrow I'm not coming because I was expecting today to do one course per day, but today I will do 2. No, I'm just joking. But try to be gentle with me because 2, it's a little bit hard, but there is a continuity between the one I did this morning and this one, because I will focus now on mental interaction with MELT, and especially on mental metasomatism. So, and probably tomorrow I will illustrate this one by one example. Okay? So, if we start with what I am one of the specialists, but we are not too many in the world. I think it's the world of the specialist of mental xenoleaf, of petrology of mental xenoleaf, is a very small world. So, just to start, a definition of what I call the mental metasomatism. For me, this is the physical and chemical processes that are implemented during the flow of magma and or fluids within the upper mantle. Okay? The main changes affecting the mantle wall rock, mostly peridotite, everybody knows here, changing texture, recrystallization, formation of new minerals, chemical exchange leading to the enrichment, sometimes depletion, we will see at the end, of mantle peridotite in incompatible twice element. Flow, in general meaning, both pervasive at grain boundaries or focus in dikes or vein. You remember this one from this morning? Two main types of movement of fluid and melt in the mantle. Grain boundary infiltration is a slow one. Crack propagation is a very quick one with 2 pictures. So typical mantle xenoleaf in alkali basalt, we have this discussion this morning. Most of them have sharp planar facets that demonstrate the brittle fracture of the lithospheric mantle, this kind of boundary. You have this kind of facet, and you can find also in some xenoleaf here with the basalt around. But the second main type of shape is a rounded shape, because after you can have the movement of the inside the melt when you bring up. But these primary features are the witness that inside the mantle you have this kind of feature. Okay? Grain boundary infiltration, where there is a very important thing is the interfacial energy. The angle here between the melt and the crystal, when you have the melt in contact with the crystal. If this interfacial energy is superior to 60 degrees, the fluid or melt form a discrete polygonal blade at grain corner like this, and it will be difficult for this kind of melt to move. Okay, they will have the tendency to stay very close to the crystal. But if this angle, this interfacial energy, is lower than 60 degrees, the fluid will weight all the grain boundaries, forming a 3-dimensional connected film, and it will move quickly. And in fact, carbonatitic and basaltic melt have a low interfacial energy, and so they will infiltrate grain boundary easily. This is why most of the metasomatic agents we find in the mantle are of basaltic affinity, of carbonatite affinity, of lamproite, kimberlitic affinity. At the opposite, CO2 and water-rich fluid have high interfacial energy and form blade at grain junction in mantle rock, so there's a tendency to stay within the mantle peridotite and forming some kind of feature like this. Okay? So just to remember this, the main metasomatic agent will be the one with this kind of interfacial energy. So we have a classification, because everybody knows in geology we like to classify things. Classify rocks, minerals, we classify everything, even isotopes. But so we classify the metasomatism. We have three types, 2 main types and 1 new types. We have what we call the modal metasomatism, that defined first by Hart in 1983. This kind of metasomatism implies the formation of new minerals additional to the 4 main phases of the mantle. I remember olivine, the 2 pyroxene, spinel or plagioclase or garnet. Okay? You have new minerals such as amphibole, for example here, mica, but you can also add carbonate, apatite, sulfide, titanite, ilmenite, zircon, and a lot of new. What you have to remember, metasomatism, you form new kind of mineral, different from the original mineralogy of the peridotite. At the opposite, you have the cryptic metasomatism, first defined by Dawson in 1984. This one only changed the composition of the pre-existing phases. Okay? Commonly, this enrichment is most of use for trace elements, and also this kind of metasomatism will decrease also the MG number. So you don't have new phases. You keep olivine, 2-pyroxene, spinel or garnet or plagioclase. You don't form, for example, phlogopite, and you just play with the element, and especially with the incompatible trace element, and you have this kind of pattern here normalized to this one is to the primitive mantle. You know, you have just the change. If you have a partial melting, for example, you will have a pattern like this, you know, decreasing from the less incompatible to the most incompatible like this. And here you have evidence of cryptic metasomatism because you change the composition. And the last one, it was defined very recently by Sue and Bill, Sue O'Reilly and Bill Griffin in 2012. It's a new kind of metasomatism. They call this one the stealth metasomatism because this one, in this case, you add phase you already have in your rocks. I mean, you have addition of new clinopyroxene or garnet, for example, or spinel in peridotite, and you have, in fact, refertilization of refractory protolite. It's a little bit more complicated. You still have the same mineralogy than with the cryptic metasomatism. For example, you have olivine, 2-pyroxene, and garnet. But we have evidence that some of these garnet, or all of them, or all of the clinopyroxene, are not primary in these rocks. They were crystallization products during the metasomatism. It's a new phase, okay? But it's a new clinopyroxene. In some rocks, you have a clinopyroxene 1. It's a typical mantle clinopyroxene. And you have the clinopyroxene 2. It's a new one crystallized directly from a melt, okay? This is why we find, for example, in some xenolith from the Cap Balcraton. This three slides come from Sue and Bill, and they did a nice, I think it's a book or part of a book in contribution, I think in Springer Verlag, where they explain all this kind of type of metasomatism. So now I will focus on the main metasomatic processes occurring within the phanerosic upper mantle. Today we focus on xenolith in mafic magma, in basaltic, mostly basaltic magma. We forget for a while the xenolith from kimberlite and lamproite. But we will see some enrichment, but also at the end I will show you that you can also deplate, in some cases, your mantle, not by partial melting, but by metasomatism. Usually, metasomatism will enrich your mantle with new mineral phases, with incompatible trace element, but in some cases, depending on the composition of the melt, you can deplate your mantle. So, we're expecting to do tomorrow. So, just to remember that in a modal diagram, the effect of the mantle metasomatism will change dramatically the kind of rocks we will have. But depending on the original composition of your melt, you can form from lersolite, you will form arsborgite, but from arsborgite you can form lersolite because you will add clinopyroxene in arsborgite by melt. You can form dunite because you will dissolve your pyroxene in a lersolite or in an arsborgite. You can even form some verlite. It's a very clinopyroxene-rich peridotite from a lersolite. So this one, just quickly, it's a normal Raroff element diagram normalized to chondrite for the peridotite. Just to show you the complexity of the metasomatism for the change in trace element. Typically, when you have partial melting process, you have this kind of pattern, what we call a type Merb pattern, because now you understand when you melt, these Raroff elements are more